good to be back.
It's great to be back. Yeah.
So, with me, always having lived in Arizona, and the only times that I've been outside of Arizona are smack dab in the middle of summer, I've never experienced daylight savings time. And this is the first time in which I have ever experienced daylight savings time in my life, the swap over. And I am so physically uncomfortable with this as an idea. I am mentally uncomfortable with this as an idea. I'm spiritually uncomfortable with this as an idea. This is probably the biggest form of torture that you could enact on a population, and people just accept it. Where I go outside and it's 9 a.m. and I see that the sun is saying that it's 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. I don't know anymore because I live my life. I've always lived my life around the circadian rhythm, around the sun. When I'm in Arizona and I have the ability to, always watching the sunrise, always watching the sunset. And when I was in the streaming and I was able to sort of decide how I wanted to structure my life and my work framing, I would consistently be like, all right, this is the time in which the sun is at its zenith angle. So, all right, now that's the time to move on to the next thing. And having the time frame when we went to church on Sunday, I physiologically feel like we're all an hour late. And I can't shrug that off. And there's one thing of people being more accepting of this because they aren't circadian aligned, which is one of the most important things. There is one thing of a study that talked about something that we've known forever, but for some people it's not real until there's a study.
Yeah.
Which is that women's menstrual cycles align with the moon cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And this stopped happening in 2010. The effect since 2010 has been less and less and less over time, where cycles are just kind of all over the place. And that makes sense when you have the idea that people are living under artificial lights. There's phones that people are attached to, so they're getting all of this light that is just completely bringing things out of whack to where normally they'd be getting just moonlight. And so people don't have as much of a connection to the sun. Talking with some people in, the sauna, and they're like, some people are, oh, hey, this is a travesty. Why don't we get rid of this?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm just bringing up, almost every state has voted to get rid of this. And then it's just never gotten rid of. So it's only me in Arizona that doesn't have it, which I feel very privileged to have that honor, in that I'm really curious as to what digging more in depth into it, into the connections of how that affects the mental psyche of people to not experience it versus places that do experience it. And essentially it's just, if you tried to just do this carte blanche on a population that was not used to this idea, if you just try to do this right now, there would just be riots. People would be chimping out is the term that the kids use these days. And so with that, so many things have to be kind of incremental. And it's also just, it's one of those things that people only accept because it has happened for so long that people just think that there must be an idea for it. So me in a city, living in a city, common idea that's talked about with it is, oh, got to make sure that the kids have enough light when they're walking to school.
Right.
And then
I live in a rural area,
okay,
out in the woods. And growing up, I was always told, well, this is for the farmers. Mm-hmm. It's so that the farmers have the right daylight amounts, which both of these things just kind of fall flat on their face, because any other institution, any other concept, or any other kind of establishment that was saying, hey, it's lighter earlier, let's start earlier, would just start earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one of these hold up to any degree of scrutiny, mm-hmm. because if you want to start earlier, you would just start earlier. There's nothing stopping any particular school district from saying, hey, now we're starting at 7 and then we're going to start at 8 in the fall or something like that. But you don't see that. No one even thinks about that. No, we're going to change everybody's lives. It's for the good of everyone.
Yeah. Which is
Good.
It's just absolutely insane. It's just of the idea of something that's, commonly talked about again is just adjusting everything to the bottom quartile. It's in that same idea that it's affecting every single person's life to such a dramatic degree for something that even the stated goal is to only affect a very small subset of people, in the same way that when me, unfortunately being a public schooler, it's just a really common thing to where, one person steals something from somebody else and then everybody has to sit in silence for 5 hours at a time because of one person doing something. Now we all have to suffer because of that. And then daylight savings, it hypothetically is just only supposed to affect some people.
Yep.
But then I have to just be like physiologically tortured because of this one stated goal, which also just goes in the idea of the purpose of a system is what it does.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of this is to get people to be disconnected from nature, to where, jobs always have to start at this X specific time, even if it doesn't make sense for all of these other ideas. We've just agreed to sort of be kind of a slave to the clock. I don't usually like using that kind of terminology and verbiage just because of all of the baggage that kind of has.
Mm-hmm.
People just denying time in general.
Right. I have 4 days for every one of your days or something.
Yeah. And so this is just one of those things that people accept just because it's a thing. And if you try to do it just right away, everybody would just not accept it. And there's so many things that are like that, where people... Another example is going to the gym around here. Everybody puts their keys at the front desk, which is often unattended, on a circular little carousel. And nobody even has the slightest idea, hey, my keys might be stolen. Whereas the idea of that happening where I'm from, in a city, in Phoenix, this would be the most crazy idea that you could possibly have. And if you took a society where people were used to having the ability to trust of, I don't need to lock my car, I don't need to lock my locker up in the gym because somebody will steal every single thing that's in there.
Yeah.
Because that's not a thing. If you suddenly put people in a society just from one day to the next, people would just not accept that. Yeah. But the problem is that these things, this destruction of high trust societies, has happened so incrementally that people are willing to accept it.
I think one of the great understandings that you have to kind of make before you can jump into any of these kind of solutions, so to speak, is to understand where the problem's being generated from. We're not really talking about media today, but it ties into this because one of the arms of normalization is media.
Mm-hmm.
And so after you and I were talking about this actually not very long ago, the whole, you hang your keys at the gym thing, that's crazy. And later that day, I get pushed a reel on my YouTube Reels of a guy who's like, POV, I finally get my stuff stolen after not getting a lock on my locker for 6 months. And, it's just him being sad. But it's like, what? This reel comes out of nowhere where it's like, yeah, I thought I could trust people. You can't, though. It's just pushing that in your mind, basically. It's like, oh, hey, these people are recognizing that, it's so cool that we can just leave our keys hung up. Let's sow some doubt into their minds. Because as you spoke, it has to be incremental. You have to first make people feel like they're being stolen from. If you look at, say, an Andy Griffith episode, for an example, people only ask Andy for a solution after something's been done. Oh, there's so much vandalism, or somebody stole something, right? And it's like somebody's got to do something. And this creates a problem because you have to then actually go out of your way if you want to get people to accept, for instance, no, everyone has to put their keys behind a locker or something like that. You have to have a crime be committed. But there's difficulty, there's logistics in actually committing a crime. But if you can just make people think that everybody else is having a crime committed against them all of the time, then they're like, well, I got to take steps to protect myself. And that's exactly the kind of incremental steps that go on to where people then accept oh, I live in this kind of a society because I've been told by 30 different YouTube reels that everyone's going to steal my stuff if I turn my back.
Yeah, and this goes into a point that we were talking about earlier with the idea of, the cell phone needs to be normalized through something like Star Trek before people have the idea of even wanting to buy it. You need to sell the idea to somebody before. So before there even is crime, you want to normalize it to people of, oh, this is just something that kind of happens. And, it might be localized to this area, but then it'll slowly start trickling out. And it'll just trickle out at the point of the level at which people are able to accept, because there will be eventually these things coming. But even in a city, if you do leave your car unlocked, as an example, the car that I drove here with that broke down, the window did not roll up. And it was kind of a beater. So I did have the benefit of this window is down, but this car is so raggedy that nobody would think that there's anything actually valuable in here. But never got it stolen from, even if I'm leaving it unattended in not so great of an area. It's really not even about the actual raw reality of things being stolen from me that I need to be thinking about. It's when I see that there are just places where people don't lock their cars, when I see that there are places where people just leave their car keys out, just in the middle of everywhere, completely unattended, I just think about how much mental energy goes into the idea of, oh, hey, I need to make sure that everything is locked. I need to make sure that everything is safe. Oh, did I not lock something? I'm worried now.
Yeah.
Even if there's such a infinitesimally small chance, even if there is zero chance that something is going to be stolen, there's so much of a mental bandwidth that has to be taken up by the idea of, oh, I need to protect myself from these thefts.
One of the things that's interesting about that particular too is with the advent of all these kinds of problems, these reoccurring problems, something that we have talked about a little bit before is just that one of the things that exhausts you is open loop concepts or open loop actions, where you have something running in your background and it never closes out. It never finishes the task. This can be one of the problems with kind of the style of jobs people have. When you have a job that never ends and it's the same thing every time, you can never close out and be like, okay, I'm on to the next thing, compared to if you work in the trades. It's very easy to mentally close the loop on one project and you get a sense of refreshment and move to the next. But in the terms of where are my keys, that's a mental loop that's unless you're very good at where are my keys, they're in my pocket. Okay, close that out. Don't think about that again for 4 hours. But at some point, then you get bit by that, because then you're like, oh no, where are my keys? And you don't know where they are because you weren't asking all the way up to that point. Whereas if you feel safe just setting your keys somewhere and knowing, well, they'll be there later. You don't have to carry them on you, transfer them from your gym bag to your clothes and so on and so forth. All these different things that just go into that. Like you said, the mental energy on that is crazy. It's another way to kind of, if you will, sub-optimize the human race. It's the same with the daylight savings. The goal, as you mentioned, the goal of the system is what it accomplishes. So then we can say, well, the goal is essentially just torturing people. But the goal is torturing them, but to the end that they perform worse. One of the things that I found really interesting in the whole daylight saving thing, I grew up with it, and I remember as a kid, the first time I was aware of it was when I had my own alarm clock. I must have been 7 or 8 years old. And, my mom telling me, oh, tomorrow you have to set the time to a different time. And I just like, ah! And as a kid, you have no way to deal with this. And the one person who's supposed to be protecting you, your parents, are telling you, no, this is the correct thing. You just absolutely, you're the grape, so to speak. You can't escape this. But I remember just being like, I don't understand this. Doesn't make any sense. But the younger generations aren't having this near as much. I know several people who are Gen Z and older Gen Alpha who get their time solely from internet synced devices such as tablets or clocks or phones, excuse me. I made an announcement at the company I work at. Hey guys, it's daylight savings. So don't forget to cut, on Monday you get an extra hour or whatever. And several of the people were like, what's daylight savings? Never experienced it because their phone switches it automatically. So they quite literally just one random morning in the spring are like, I feel terrible. I feel like I lost an hour of sleep. And then one random morning, they're like, I feel like I'm running late. I feel like I have this anxiety behind me. I don't even know what's going on because there's no actual knowledge behind this. The
Mhm.
phone does it automatically. It doesn't say, hey, tomorrow I'm setting your alarm to blah, blah, blah. I'm
Mhm.
changing this thing. Just does it. And that's part of that incremental step towards people not even noticing it. And it's just impacting their performance and their mental bandwidth so dramatically.
Yeah, whereas I have my phone and computer and everything set to Arizona time, which is correct for where we're at.
It is the same time zone.
Yes,
It is the same time zone, yeah.
some of the time, and then other times it's not. So then that makes me even more confused. And I don't
Yeah.
know. I still don't know exactly if it's bringing it an hour back or bringing it an hour forward. It's one of those things that has just genuinely been so hurtful for me because I'm a sensitive young man. And this is something that I'm very sensitive to, which is, the daytime, the sun time. I base so much around it. And I always go outside and think about, okay, this is what time it is.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden that's changed. That I've just like shut down at the concept. At first, I was so enraged that I wanted to like commit felonies against somebody. But I don't know. There is nobody for me to commit felonies to. There's nobody that I can go walk up into the street who is responsible for this and like tell them what's up. I can't do that.
Go find daylight savings.
I need
Go
to
find John daylight savings.
Yeah, I need to go find John Savings. And so because I can't do that, like to some degree, I've just like shut down on the concept of I've given up on understanding what time it is.
This is just something that I can just attest to, just kind of testimonially, just you being here this summer, being one of those guys, even when it's cloudy, which a big cope for a lot of the people that live where I live is just, oh, you don't need to be connected to the sun, or you don't need the sun because like it's just cloudy most of the time and you don't see the sun as often as you would other places. And you're still right on in terms of just, well, what the general light is at dawn. And a lot of people just aren't calibrated to that. And I find that really interesting because most of the people that I bring this up to, which, by the way, when I finally came to my senses at the ripe age of 24 years old and realized this daylight savings thing is really not great, when I spoke to people about this, they're just like, why do you care? Like, that's the mentality.
Yeah. There was somebody else in the sauna who was just like, just wake up an hour earlier. Like, don't pay attention to it. Like, it only does things if you pay attention to it.
But it doesn't. It changes the schedule for everything.
Literally every single thing has its schedule
like,
changed.
If you wake up early and go to the store, it will be closed.
Yes.
They are not open.
Yeah. And then so your routine is going to have to be changed.
Yeah.
Like, you actually do have to interact with the outside world. And what the outside world is doing is something that is going to affect you, even if you try to not make it affect you.
Yeah. But it's just crazy to me because people say, oh, well, the clouds, oh, well, this, you can't really tell where the sun is anyway. But you're pretty much proof positive of this. I remember that Sunday. You were just livid.
Yeah.
Because it's like your whole morning's ruined. And I'm kind of sitting there going, yeah, I knew this was coming. And yeah, this was difficult for me and my family as well. It didn't affect me as much, not because it didn't hurt me as much, but because I'm already hurt.
Yeah.
To the point where it doesn't hurt as much, contrast to that. And just in terms of how badly we've been worked over, so to speak, in this particular climate, and then in the lifetime of just accepting whatever. Because I want to clarify, I have many times, even this summer, quite often woke up at 4 a.m. And that is not the same as having the entire calendar shifted. Because when I wake up at 4 a.m. and I go to work at 4 a.m., I'm off quite early. And I have plenty of daylight. I don't feel like I'm waking up at 9. Whereas now, with the one we just experienced, I wake up at the normal time, and it's an hour earlier. But the daylight is telling me it's something different. But it's just not as effective on me, I think, as it is on you. Because, again, I've just kind of accepted the hurt. I'm just victim. Victim mindset.
Yeah, this is a thing to where I have no choice but to expunge the rage. It's very fresh for me. I'm very much just the innocent dove the first time he realizes that, oh, people lie.
Yeah.
And because I have nobody to direct my anger towards, because I can't chimp out, I just have to accept it. And so many people, the majority of people, will try to accept what they are given and come up with reasons or justifications for why this isn't that bad, because that's just the most efficacious way to live your life. You have to normalize things that you see and normalize things that you experience, because otherwise you will just go crazy. And I don't quite know if I can do that, so I guess I'm just gonna go crazy. First time experiencing this is the thing that one shots me.
This is the secret knowledge that one shots you.
Yeah.
I think when you look at it from that perspective too, you start to understand also how easy it is for people to cling to the beliefs they have, because there's a certain security in accepting when you're when you just go, oh yeah, it's kind of difficult, but you just got to get up an hour earlier or an hour later or whatever. There's a certain attachment to, well, I'm tough, I'm rigid. My wife and I were actually discussing something akin to this, in that people will say, oh, you can't have children in like a 2-bedroom apartment or a 1-bedroom apartment. Like that's just not good for the children. And the exact same people that are saying that are the people that will be like, your generation has it so easy. You're so weak.
Yeah.
So it's like hardship was really, really good for them, but now you're not allowed to engage in hardship. And it's just kind of this cross-wired cope of like, I'm accepting that hardship was difficult for me, and it was like, whatever, it built my character. And then they have their children, and they're like, yeah, but I don't want my children to have to go through the same thing I went through. Well, if the thing you went through was good, why wouldn't you want your children to go through it? And that's kind of that thing where they go, oh, well, public school wasn't great for me, but I want my kid to go to public school. Why? What's the logic behind that? And then this idea that, oh, you're not allowed to have hardships. Why not? If they were so good in the past, why are they not so good now? Or like, oh, you can't do that to your children. Just kind of bonkers in the sense that people will cling on to the things that hurt them and kind of use those as bolsters to their own self. And the same thing with daylight savings. People will go, oh, it's great. I love it. I love getting an hour back in the fall.
Yeah, exactly what you're saying, of just justifying that, oh, this hardship is what made me a better person. Therefore, it was good for me to have gone through this horrible thing. But then also, you shouldn't do these things because you were exposing yourself to the horrible thing. This is just complete incoherence. There is no logical connection there whatsoever. Yet it's still something that's believed. And there's a whole bunch of examples that you can kind of give of this. And it really just does go into a complete, disconnection of generations, where this is, I'm pretty sure we've talked about this before on the podcast, this is probably the biggest detriment of public school to society, is the idea of separating generations to where people don't interact with each other. They don't interact with their grandparents, their grand-aunts, whatever. So that there's just a complete mismatch between what these people are experiencing versus what the other people are experiencing. Because with a public school example, it's the public school that they went to is completely different than the public school today. And they would just not believe you if you said how bad it was. Because, what other source of information are they getting from this? You are so much weaker in this, that, and the other way versus, me, I already had a house, 50K in the savings account, and this level of career efficiency at your age, yet you don't have these things.
Right.
This is because you are a bad person. Why are you a bad person?
Well, the reality is I'm a bad person because I'm being made suboptimal by my surroundings. And this is kind of the focus of what we're talking about here, is there are so many things that the enemy does to suboptimize your brain. And many of these things do suboptimize things like your wallet and your spending. We're going to get into inflation in a bit as well, just kind of as a bunch of different elements that are being done to this generation. It's not so much a matter of hardship even, because if you look at psychological torture, you could call that a hardship, but it's really a misnomer, right? A hardship is like, you crashed your car broke down on you, the ship carrying your very expensive shipment crashed, right? Like, that's hardship. It's not hardship when people are just out to get you. And that's why so many people are paranoid in terms of like, oh, the government's out, because they are. But the way they're out to get you is all these kind of interesting means and ways. One of the things you mentioned just a few moments ago was, well, at the beginning of the episode, how moon cycle, women's cycles, used to more or less line up, and in 2010 it goes away. A big concept that everyone should put a pin in is 2012 being kind of like the year in terms of I don't want to say reset, but there's a dynamic change in how the world functions pre-2012 and post-2012. I think we're going to see more of that as we go along, but many of the subjects we've talked about, that kind of time frame, which 2010 obviously is when the study was done, but 2012 really marks kind of the end of an era where the things before it are not related to the things ahead of it in any meaningful way.
Yeah, there's so much more of a definition to things pre-2012, whereas everything post-2012 is essentially the exact same thing. Like, really, nothing has changed, but also everything has changed to become nothing.
Yeah.
In terms of chaos is white noise, to where everything is sort of happening at the same level, and there's no coherence behind things. Whereas to get actual sound, to get something that has a definition, something that is discernible, there has to be, like, these levels of these sound waves are down and these levels are higher. And there is a coherence, there is a pattern to it. Yeah. Whereas post-2012, just absolutely none of that whatsoever.
Yeah, and you can see this in the news articles. We've talked about news articles being fake, generated by AI, how you can know they're generated by AI or just made up by various people, algorithms targeting these. All that's been talked about. The question is kind of the why. And again, it plays into this white noise. Mm-hmm. Everyone's getting fed their own specific version of reality that's catered to their particular populace. One of the interesting aspects about this is the cultural divide. Mm-hmm. People are going to hate me for this, but it's the truth, and people should just relax. In the 60s, I shouldn't say the 60s. In the late 50s, we had what's known as a homogenous culture. Mm-hmm. There were all these acceptable beliefs. You could be a Democrat, you could be a Republican, and those came with their allotted viewpoints that were acceptable and respected. Mm-hmm. The advent of the 60s and the 70s, the sexual revolution, brought about a society that was divided into two camps. And this division meant that you had to live your life in one of the camps or the other. And mm-hmm. you couldn't pick and choose different thoughts from different camps. Mm-hmm. For instance, if you were a guy who is, say, a company man working in Detroit building automotive, you're not allowed to have the opinion that pollution is bad because mm-hmm. that's a hippie view. Mm-hmm. And so in all of your circles, there's a set priority view, and you must adhere to that. And then everything outside of that is anathema, and the vice versa. And in the 90s, we had a convergence of these two, where suddenly all of the views were acceptable again. Mm-hmm. You can have any number of these views and be accepted by any number of other people who have any number of other views. Mm-hmm. And so we enjoy kind of this 20 years of peace, so to speak, from the 1992 basically until 2012. And we have what is now basically the white noise culture. Mm-hmm. Nothing's acceptable to anybody, no matter who you say it to.
Yeah, it's
or what view you have.
Yeah, it's simultaneously nothing is acceptable and everything is acceptable because there is no coherency to things.
Yeah,
in the sense of you could find, MAGA communism, like all of these completely dramatic, different
I forgot about that. Yeah,
conceptions
you're right.
of ideas that exist, and like there is no, dominant hegemony in the culture.
Yeah.
In that I could find so many, right-leaning people that are very much into environmentalism. Mm-hmm. Because, if you would think about it, the idea of conservatism would want to conserve nature because it should make sense that they care about it more. And in the same way of classically, immigration has always been a left-wing topic because it's on a communist lens. All of the communists were against it mm-hmm. because it's the idea of removing worker solidarity. When you try to bring in a whole bunch of different groups, you cannot collectivize and bargain unions when you have a whole bunch of different groups that you can just pit against each other, or that, this group tries to collectivize and then you just, I'm just going to go get another group from somewhere else. And you see all of these different interesting viewpoints, but they don't go anywhere. Like nothing goes anywhere because there is no coherency to anything. There is just the default thing. And everybody also wants to feel like they're in the culture where times are actually changing. Like, just, I'm going to bring up a current thing. I'm sorry. Just the idea of, the way that lefties would look at Trump.
Okay.
Starting there is that they would think that, he's going to be the end of the world and he's going to be all of these things. He's going to be super fascista. And then he's just not any of those things.
Right.
Whereas the people who are those things would I wish he was that. In the same way that, the guy who won the New York City mayor thing.
I know his name, but I don't want to say it.
Yeah. He is he's going to do all of these super insane things.
Right.
But then people will also simultaneously say that politicians don't actually do what they promise. And all of these politicians end up converging to the nothingness where nothing ever happens because nothing ever happens.
You see this all over in basically every single field and every single area where it doesn't matter what you are. It doesn't matter what views you hold to. You say, I'm a Marxist. But it used to be, if you were a Marxist, you had to be in the Marxist worldview, exist inside that purview, and hold to those ideals. Whereas nowadays, you can say I'm a Marxist, and then immediately be like, but I'm also a capitalist or something. And this kind of white noise is super, super stressful. It's really analogous to something else that has been talked about, which is white noise while sleeping. So in order for you to be creative, in order for you to be an individual who is going to write music or come up with cool worlds, which, by the way, just as an aside, no one truly creates in that sense, but you tell your truth or your lens, and that is the way in which it is really, really helps. You tell the story. It's the same story every time, and I can't stress that enough. If it's a good story, it's the same story.
Tolkien and Tolkien-style people have the idea that you're essentially revealing the truth. You're revealing an idea. Like when he was considering writing a story of post Fellowship of the Ring.
I thought it was post Numenorian Fall.
Regardless, sometime after Aragorn died, and all of these successive kings, and he was essentially writing Game of Thrones, and then just realized that this is just a crummy story, but he didn't want to just pretend that it was something else. It's just that these are the natural truths of the world that would have been, and he was simply just revealing it. And then he was just like, nah, this is not a story that I want to write.
Yeah.
So just in that sense of, writing and creative things, revealing truth, and then going back to the white noise.
Yes. So when you're doing that, when you're going to be revealing the truth that's there, you need inspiration. And the root word of inspiration is to breathe in. So, if I'm inspired, that means I breathed in something else. And then to expire is to breathe out, right? So just keep that in mind. When you're inspired, that means you're literally taking in something else. Well, that thing has to be cognitive. It has to be something that makes sense. It has to be something that can be perceived. And so white noise is not something that can ever be used as inspiration. I know people will be like, well, what about breakcore or something? I don't care. I really don't care about that. That's not real. That's fake. But the point is simply that all great things come from an inspiration, and the inspiration is what you're taking in, what you're breathing in. We always say, you are basically the sum of the 5 people you hang out with the most. You're inspired by them because you're breathing in them all of the time. And so on a more practical note, think about this in terms of the real world. There's the static noise we're talking about, that white noise that's kind of like in the background of your mind, or where are my keys? Daylight saving time is coming up. Oh, I have to say the right things to the right people here, and I have to at the same time have no opinions at all, blah, blah, blah. But then there's the very real white noise of playing white noise while you're sleeping. This is a huge thing. People, oh, you have trouble sleeping? Play white noise. White noise does help you sleep, but it does not help you dream or to have creative thought in your dreams.
Yeah, so people will have rainmakers, and it essentially just becomes white noise. Whereas, as you can see, I said that I wasn't going to do it, but I'll still do it anyway. The rain is something that is a story almost, which is why I love wind chimes so much. And if you ever try to just hit wind chimes, it's essentially incoherent.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. Whereas when you just let wind chimes naturally, it's almost just like you're giving an instrument to God and you're just letting him play it out.
That's a really grandiose way to put it. I like that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So wind chimes are essentially just letting God play the instrument.
God's harp. Okay.
Yes. And it's so much more like beautiful. Whereas when you just have a white noise machine, it's just consistent and there's nothing in there for you to take. Whereas if you do have that like natural rain noise while you're dreaming, the ups and downs, the peaks, the valleys, the high, the low, the window kind of shaking a little bit, the window not kind of shaking a little bit, the wind, all of these things get incorporated into your dream, and you're kind of trying to make sense out of them, create a story out of them. Whereas when you just have white noise, there's just nothing, because you're just kind of being completely drowned out, and there's nothing to make coherency out of. Whereas when you are trying to make thoughts in general, you are trying to take all of these, potentially at first unrelated things and then try to make some way to where they are related. Whereas you can't do that with white noise. So you're not, it's almost just like training a muscle.
Yeah.
Like you're not training that muscle of consistently getting into the idea of creativity, which is creating coherency out of, oh, I have a pencil and there's lead there and I'm going to create something that's coherent. Whereas when you look at people that are, insane making artists, making art, you look at the art and it is just a manifestation of their mind, and there is zero coherency to it whatsoever.
I think one of the other interesting aspects of that is just when you limit an artist, you almost always produce better things. It's something that is just fundamental. Every artist thinks, oh, if I just had all the, the time and the resources and blah, 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 I could focus on my art, I would produce something great. But pretty much everything that's ever been produced that was great had limitations. Either, the materials they're working with, the time frame, the subject, something is limiting them, and it gives them focus, and it also gives them inspiration, because you can't breathe in white noise.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get any inspiration from that. It's lulling you to sleep, and that sleep is not a good sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's a creative sleep in the sense that you're slumbering from your creativity,
mm-hmm.
and you're just letting everything go away, which is exactly, drawing it back out to the big picture, exactly what all of this white noise of the world around us is designed to do. It's designed to trouble you. It's designed to put you to sleep. So you walk through life kind of in a daze. And, this is even before we talk about people who have health issues that actually put them in a daze, or
mm-hmm.
I guess after we talk about, because we did talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to and above that, there's so many things on so many levels that are just causing people to basically nauseate themselves into sleep.
Yeah, and so first off, to give a more concrete example of the idea of like limitations breeding creativity, is just the biggest example that I would look at that is like, Super Nintendo music. Almost all of the music from these franchises were all from that era where you were limited to 5 tones that you could have to sort of create the entire music piece. And like, there's never any dramatically incredible pieces that come out of music when people have access to, full orchestras, and there's absolutely zero limitations whatsoever. And even when people try to make, 8-bit songs or whatever, they're almost like self-imposing the limitations to where they're like, if I want to do this thing, I'll just get rid of this limitation.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas actually being forced into that thing, whereas, even like you're never going to find a good song from whatever, like Expedition 33 or whatever the newest game is. It's going to be just absolutely nothing. Whereas, with the Super Nintendo stuff, all of the songs that are still popular today originated from there. Because when you have those limitations, you focused more on the things that you could focus on, of like, all right, I got to have a consistent, like, I got to have a nice, like, melody, something that is with small little pieces, something that is memorable. So you even look at the slop from those days of just the low quality games, and they still have, nice, catchy tunes. Whereas you look at even the best of today, and there just isn't anything. Whereas this was a topic that was also talked about with, Marvel movies, where it was, oh, can you think of any soundtrack that came from a Marvel movie.
There's that one. Bwah.
Dun, 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 dun. Whereas this was always a point before that song came out.
Yeah.
But it's still fundamentally true. Like that one little exception doesn't change the rule.
There's that good song, how does it go? Avengers Assemble or something?
Yeah, yeah.
No, you're totally correct.
Mm-hmm.
So much of that is problematic in the sense that they're given carte blanche in terms of, just create epic music or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to, say, Howard Shore, Lord of the Rings. Probably one of the better aspects. We've talked about Lord of the Rings being mid before, but in the movie adaptations, one of the better things that we get out of that from it being a movie is that we get a soundtrack that goes with it. Before that, the soundtrack was just kind of something you heard in your head. And Howard Shore brought that to life in a particular way under the very tight scrutiny and very tight restrictions of both Peter Jackson and even Alan Lee, who's one of the artists who wrote so much of the drawings, the concept art for Lord of the Rings, because these are people who know the work, and so they already have an idea of what's going on, and so the Howard Shore has to produce for them. This is very tight restriction because they're looking for a very specific feel, a very specific vibe to the whole thing, and that produces the greatness compared to Avengers, which is like, make an epic song. That sounds epic. Cool, let's go.
Yeah, this is one thing to where I simultaneously have this idea that like creative projects are better when there is a single mastermind behind it, which you would think, okay, the single mastermind has like, oh, this person has unlimited creativity. But it's also in the sense that they are raining down on everybody else so that you're not having sort of a paint by numbers or decisions by committee, to where you have the singular person like the Hideo Kojima, who is the one who is creating everything, and everything is sort of their baby. They're being overly controlling, and for better or for worse, having that coherency is the exact opposite of white noise.
Yes.
Whereas when you have things by committee, you're having so many things that just don't really blend together because there isn't a singular creative force driving, which also just goes into the idea that everything should be consistent, coherent, to where there is a singular unification focus, to where if you're running a business, you don't want to have it to where the boss man is asking just every random low-level grunt of, oh, hey, how do you think I should, bid this job?
Yeah.
How do you think I should do this? How do you think I should do that? No, you just do it. And it's like, all right, this is the way that we're going to be running the company for the next, 6 months. And this is just what's going to be accepted.
I think just as a fun little example I thought of, this kind of relates to our risk matrix in a way. And so if you're thinking of a symphony or an orchestra, let's say, those of you that are orchestra heads will get this one probably. So your high risk individual is your violin, your first chair. And the director is going to be a pretty medium to low risk individual, the conductor, I should say. And he's going to call on first chair to do some improvisation. And when he calls on them to do that, it's in the greater context of he's like, a violin solo would go hard here. It's not really a solo. When you improvise, it's a little bitty trill or here or there. But he's the guy that's directing, okay, do your thing now.
Yes.
And it's the same way with every single project. You want everyone to mostly just be in harmony all the time. And somebody gives license to somebody to go hard. And that person goes as hard as they possibly can in that moment. And you hope it's good. And if it doesn't work out, that person loses their job.
Yes.
It's just that simple.
Which also goes into the point of something I've talked about quite a bit, not necessarily in content, but just that jazz is the worst genre ever created. And this is essentially a perfect synonym to everything else that has been going on in culture, to where jazz is defined by its incoherence, whereas classical Bach music is mathematical in nature, to where everything is coherent, everything is very orderly. And that's where a lot of its beauty comes from, is from its order. Whereas jazz is defined as there's not a coherent beginning, it's not a coherent middle, there's not a coherent end. It's just a bunch of people vibing. And when people say they like jazz, especially within the kind of circles that, a lot of viewers would be in, when they say they like jazz, they're talking about something like Cowboy Bebop, which is just, it's like...
Or I've heard this before, but people are like, I thought I liked jazz, turns out I like big band.
Yeah. To where I will give this take of, oh, jazz is just a horrible genre because it has no coherency. And then people are like, oh, what are you talking about? Like, here's a bunch of jazz songs. And then none of them are actually jazz.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, having a saxophone does not make you jazz. And
we'll table that one for now.
yeah. So it's like the, you know, when the Japanese do Cowboy Bebop and they're doing all of these jazzy instruments to have a jazzy vibe, the music is super coherent in nature. And so it doesn't have the classical elements of what jazz is, which is white noise, which also just goes into the general way that jazz was enacted upon the population, to where it was something that everybody rejected wholesale for the longest time because everybody just hated it. But they kept on going to the most prestigious venues. And they, instead of classical music that was being played, they're just like, we'll play jazz. And we'll play jazz over and over and over again. We'll put it on the radio, we'll put it here, we'll put it there. Until eventually people are like, all right, there's so much jazz in my life, I can't just keep on crashing out because the jazz is going to be there regardless.
Yeah.
I guess I like jazz. Because there is that need to sort of like normalize and accept the ways that you have been abused. And jazz is a way that people have been abused.
Yes. I think there's a really good analogy here too. Or not, it's not an analogy, it's kind of a counterpoint, just in terms of when people hear this, they might be tempted to think, so anything I just instinctively just don't like is bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily true, because there's such a thing as cultivating taste.
Mm-hmm.
But understanding that many, many, many of the things that we consider delicacies came from people being forced on them for a certain amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
We can look at escargot.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you that don't know, that's snails. And they're cooked in a particular method to make escargot in France. But this dish didn't pop out of a hole in the ground. During one of the famines in France, the people started getting the snails off the street for extra protein because they were starving. And an entire generation of Frenchmen grew up eating lots of snails as part of their diet. Well, guess what? When they grow up, they don't just suddenly be like, I want something different now.
Mm-hmm.
All they've known is snail, and that's what they're eating. That's fine for them. It doesn't mean that you have to automatically like snail. But
Mm-hmm.
the same is true for lobster. The same is true for shrimp. These were foods that were traditionally poor man foods because you could get them by the bucket load and they look kind of nasty and you have to gut all the bad stuff out and cook them up just right. But when enough people grow up and then the poverty moves away, that is, the economy recovers or so on, people still have a drive for that thing. And this is one of the ways people can acquire taste. And what I want to be careful about saying here is some things are objectively good and some are objectively bad. Shrimp, crawdads, snails, and jazz are not objectively good. If you have a taste for them, it's probably because you were starving for something that's real, and that's what you had to eat at that time. And now you have an appreciation for that thing. And to this day, jazz is probably one of the most slept on genres. I've talked to several very accomplished, so we say jazz artists, and they're always kind of have the same complaint, which is I still have to play in a dingy bar somewhere because no one really wants to hear jazz. And I'm not really hating any of those people too bad, but the reality is that should tell you something. If the venues you get are these people who are spiritually starved, maybe your stuff just isn't that good. I'm sure someone's going to be like, that's not true. There's jazz hall, blah, 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 blah. But if you look at like Netherlands Bach Society, they play in the most prestigious places. And to be a part of the Netherlands Bach Society, you have to be a very talented musician to start with, and then have a drive to play Bach. They're very selective. So the point simply being, yes, there's such a thing as an acquired taste. Not all acquired tastes are good. Not all acquired tastes are bad. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean you can throw it away. But you should rather look at the origin of something, look at how it came about, and actually break it down as to what it is to determine what something is. But a very good indicator is the taste test. If something tastes bad, it's probably bad. You mentioned some of that stinky fish. You were going to do a content thing. Yeah. And someone else was talking about, well, it's probably just shipped bad, and that's why people hate it. Because by the time it gets to them, it's
already so expired.
Yeah, exactly. So in that regard, it's like, well, you shouldn't just be like, I guess I have to learn how to like this really, really bad fish. If it tastes that bad, it is probably expired. Because it turns out it doesn't taste that bad, when you get it from the source.
Yeah, just getting it fresh, which is a very similar thing with like liver, where, it's something that Ray Pete talks about and then is confirmed by you, who has more experience with
Yes.
this, which is just the idea of liver has a very liver taste.
Mhm.
And it's something that is very pungent. And a lot of people will get up to the idea of like, oh, I actually like liver now. But when you have liver completely fresh, when it's not denatured whatsoever, it doesn't have that strong, pungent odor taste.
Yeah.
And that is the sort of natural way. Whereas when you just come to the idea of, oh, liver is very good, it tastes this particular way, you'll eventually just normalize it. You'll psyop yourself into liking it. And yeah, this is just wrapping around a couple points back is just the idea of like psyoping and normalizing things. Whereas when you look at the generational divide, the generational gap, it's so much more convenient for the older person in our society to just kind of trivialize or deny the just absolute torture and negative things that are going on in the lives of younger folk right now. And it is just in the idea of if they took those complaints seriously and they understood exactly what it meant to be a young person in the modern age, then what would the logical conclusion have to be from that? It would have to be either I need to put in a lot of effort to help younger people in my family, or accept that I am a horrible person.
Yeah.
Because there's not really any other way of going about it. So instead of making that sacrifice, you instead just, no, it's not an issue. Just completely deny it.
Yeah, it's your fault that things are going bad for you.
Mhm.
That's the easiest way to look at things. Blame a lot of people that way. Kind of brings us to just the concept of inflation, and people go, oh, inflation, what kind of a normie topic, right?
Mhm.
But you have to understand the different ways that people get around inflation and how really destructive it is. A lot of people in the United States, which I live in, so that's most of my experience, look at it and they go, oh, well, it's this percent, or it's that percent, or, oh, yeah, it's, the really out there guys are like, inflation's like 300% since 2000 or whatever.
Mhm.
But the reality is, you have to look at not just the inflation, but the other aspects of it, something called shrinkflation. And there's a few other points in this, but you brought up something really interesting just the other day. You were shopping, and it's like it just happens right in front of your eyes. You are Mr. Orange Juice, for those people that don't know. Ray Pete Space, Mr. Orange Juice. So he buys a lot of orange juice.
Mhm.
And you sent this picture. I think I'm going to have...
Which I'll post it on screen in post.
And it's like, here's the orange juice right next to the pulp version versus the no pulp version.
Which is the old version versus
Yes.
the new version.
The new packaging.
Yes.
Packaging. And it's like the old version is a 52 ounce
Mhm.
thing, and the new version is 46 ounces.
Mhm.
They're the same price. And even the price tag underneath the one that says 46 ounce says on it 50 ounces or 54.
52 or something.
52 ounces. I think it's 52. And it's just like, what? It's just happening just right here. You're literally just being robbed of, 6 ounces.
It's directly right in my face, and I'm still paying the same price, and I'm just getting less product, and it's very visible. This is something that people should chimp out on. In a just world, people would chimp out on this.
People go to the counter and be like, come on.
Yeah, you're giving me less product. Like, don't make me pay the same price. And this is just another thing that people will normalize. And it is just something that is just very unacceptable. But it is also just in the idea of, with what you're saying, just going into the point of, there are so many ways that inflation happens versus just making things more expensive. And it's not, oh, you get paid a little bit less relative to what it should be. Like, oh, you just don't get as much of a raise, or this thing happens or that thing happens. It's like, oh, you don't have a job because we're just going to give this job to people that will accept infinitely less than you will. You will never accept the prices that are for certain things. And then people will give the justification of, oh, well, you're too stubborn, you're too young, you don't have it hard enough, and you need to just accept these wages that are being given to you. Whereas one is that the people saying that never had to accept those wages.
Right.
And so they will just deny that those wages are the same. And this is where people have just completely illusionary views of what inflation is like, to where so many people, especially it depends on what type of, when you lived your life versus times of really, really high amounts of inflation in a relative time period versus if you didn't, then you just might not understand the subject, because there are times to where things will go really high in price for a couple of years and then stay there versus like a more gradual pace. And just going into, it is essentially just something that you have to accept, but then also the people that are against that conceptually are still essentially fighting for the idea that they are against, which just goes back into the idea of having to try to normalize everything that is happening.
Yeah.
Of this idea of all of these jobs that would normally be going to you, all of a sudden aren't, then this is something that is your fault. This is something that is not to blame for somebody that is actually unblameable. There is nobody to blame for the actual real issue that is happening. So you have to blame somebody that is actually there. This is a similar concept that, Thorin has talked about with the idea of the benefits of having Trump in office, is that everybody directed their anger towards Trump. And then, in that 2020, 2024 period, whatever, where he wasn't in there, then it's like, oh, all of these people that are not Trump don't even vaguely have the same ideas for why these people hate Trump.
Yeah.
They're just attacking anybody because they don't have anybody else to attack. So they're just kind of focusing all of their energy into, completely normal person.
Yeah, I think I want to get in detail terms of just kind of how one of these elements work, because I'm more intimately familiar with the rural aspects, so to speak. So like you can just look at orange farming or lettuce in California. And one of the things that has gone on there is in the 50s, you had a lot of people picking these kinds of things. You had a lot of Americans picking the fruit and picking the veggies there in California. And what ends up happening, you have a lot of Americans picking fruit in California and veggies. And as time goes on, those people who are picking that fruit, the wages just don't match what they want. They move on to better things. And as they move on to better things, the wages don't increase, because what you would expect is all of our workers are leaving the field because of inflation. So they have to do more. And the reality is then you have to then pay more to attract new individuals. But instead, what was done was a ton of immigrants were pulled in from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And this was done to Mexicans, and it was not okay. I would call this slave labor. They brought them in, and they say, you're going to work for this super, super low price. And what happens is that price in the supermarkets actually takes a little dip. You got lettuce and you got oranges a little cheaper in, say, the 60s in California. And these Mexicans are working, and they're working. But the problem with bringing in other people is they do want the same things eventually that Americans want. They want stable job, they want a house, they want a family. And this job can't provide them with that in America.
Mm-hmm.
So they spend quite a bit of time building up their wealth, and then they go and they buy houses and they do these different things. They go to different jobs, which now means you have to get more new Mexicans to come in from Mexico to
like
fill the jobs.
Guatemalans or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so this was a problem that started then and has spiraled way out of control. You can look at like the dairy industry. Used to be a lot of Dutch men worked on dairies in California, and Portuguese. And they moved here and they worked on their own dairies and they paid themselves. And as dairies grew, they couldn't afford to pay family members more. So family members quit working and they hired Mexicans to fill the gap. And it goes on. The cycle continues. Mexicans come in, they work for maybe 10 years on these terrible, terrible wages, eventually have enough money, maybe speak enough English or have enough forged documents that they can go somewhere else. And they do because they're qualified to. And then they have to bring in more Mexicans to do the thing. And the value of this to the US government is the price of milk, lettuce, and oranges stays very low. It does not go up because you're continually exploiting these people who just want to come to the United States. And then it makes it worse because now these people live here and they were just taking the menial jobs. But after 10 years, now they're competing with like the normal jobs that normal Americans would compete for. So now it's super difficult. And then the universal attitude of every Mexican I've ever met is, I'm glad I'm here, close the gate behind me. Because I don't want new Mexicans coming in. Because what they would prefer is no new Mexicans, so they could just simply get paid more at the job they're at.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the game that gets played. So this goes on and goes on and goes on until the modern day, where you can look at the price of milk in the store, which is regulated by the federal government. They determine how much farmers are allowed to sell their milk for. They can't sell over a certain price. And they do this through co-ops and a few other things. And that, even the most expensive milk in the store is like $10 a gallon, and that's organic, grass-fed, A2 milk or something like that. Super expensive milk, and of course the cheapest milk is I think $3.50 or something like that.
Something like that.
So you have this gamut to run, right? But if you buy milk on the black market, which people around here are like to do because the milk quality is so much better on the black market than it is in the stores, which is why they buy it, you can look to pay $18 to $25 a gallon, and that's a bargain. I know people selling for $34 a gallon. So you're looking at over double the cost of the milk, the most expensive milk in the supermarket, versus actual farmed milk by Americans who maintain their own animals. It's just insane, the difference. So you should be paying $25 a gallon for milk, and you're paying $3. And who eats that? The farmer eats it first, which forces him to eat it to the labor, who then has to stick it to the guy behind him, and so on and so forth down the line. And those slaves, as I call them, they get that. They have to work for 10 years basically for nothing until they can assimilate enough to escape their slavehood.
Yeah, and this is a big thing going back into the idea of the people that would be, the most, we care about workers' rights, we care about worker conditions, are the ones that are also defending this as a practice, which is just incoherent. Like, if you want, a higher minimum wage, then you shouldn't want to have people that are working for significantly less. And yeah, this is just another way of hiding inflation, whereas that $25 a gallon milk is the real price of milk. And then it's just the other subsidized milk that has so many barriers to make it appear cheaper, even though it's not. And you'll end up paying for it in other ways, either through the indirect way of, now all of a sudden no young people can get jobs,
right,
because of this continual gradual increase. But then it's also, in the amount of money that gets taken out of your paycheck. All of these subsidies for corn, as an example, everything has high fructose corn syrup, everything has sugar in it. And that is one of the most heavily subsidized spaces that there are, to where the actual real price of corn would be significantly higher. And if that price was more obvious, more real, that the sticker price wasn't the only thing that you saw, then people would just be way less accepting of it. Which just goes back into the idea of things have to happen incrementally and gradually, so that when you do have times to where things are getting worse and worse and worse, you have to, as the rulers, you have to make it to where there's ways of continuously finding more and more ways of hiding the real price increase of these things, in order to make it not seem as steep. Whereas it's very easy for somebody today to look at the price of something and still in their head it's in 2016 prices, which shouldn't even be that long ago. And then they'll look at it today and they're like, whoa, this is so insane. And for things that are, if they were to look at the price increase of where the increase is actually happening, then they just wouldn't accept it. So that's why there are all of these mechanisms in place to make sure that things are going gradually at a pace to where people are willing to accept them getting abused more and more and more.
If you look at soybean oil versus cow fat for a moment, let's look at canola oil specifically on the shelf. Very, very cheap compared to beef tallow or, goose tallow or any other kind of fat you want to buy in the store, olive oil and so on. And you have to ask yourself, why is it so cheap? Why is canola oil so cheap? And of course, the reality is, I know lots of soybean farmers. They get paid by the government to grow the soybean way more than the value of the soybean is because they're subsidized. And then the manufacturers who are manufacturing this, that's what it is. It's not a harvesting; it's a manufacturing of the oil. They get also subsidized. So it's interesting that even the reality is that soybean oil is cheaper than beef tallow only because of subsidies. Beef tallow is not even that expensive, but soybean oil would be much, much, much more expensive than beef tallow ever would be to produce. And so I think one of the aspects you have to ask is, well, why? Why go through all that trouble and spend all that money? And the reality is because if everyone started using beef tallow like they did in, say, the 70s, then all of a sudden there would be a huge demand for it. You'd have to have more cattle, and that plays against certain other concepts. Then there's more beef. Beef would be cheaper. There's demand for the fat. The meat goes down. There's all these different things they don't want. People will just be eating more meat. But the issue is that they can't actually artificially deflate the price of beef nearly as easily as they can soybean, because the way it's farmed and the way it's butchered has to be done by fairly talented people, even like the Mexicans that cut up meat. That's usually their third or fourth job in America. It's not number one necessarily. There are some people in your homeland who I've noticed butcher meat, and they're just fresh, very fresh off the boat. From the 2 hours I spent in Yuma.
Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, the point is just that it's because they're able to that they pick soybean oil. It's much easier to get the cost of that down by subsidies than it would be for the cows. There's not as many middlemen, not as many things to pay. And it just also then makes it so that they can get beef tallow and beef meat to go up in price, and beef tallow kind of pushed to the side.
Yeah, that's another example of how things can be shrinkflated, is that you're not just, lowering the amount of, I'm just looking at the organic orange juice that we're talking about. It's the exact same product. Whereas oftentimes it'll just go to, from one product to a significantly inferior product.
Yes.
And this is something that will happen with Epic Foods, as an example, is one of the, nice, wholesome food sale places that makes, beef tallow. It makes all of these nice, high quality foods. Like they might have some chips that are fried in, beef tallow or something like that. And then, they get bought out by General Mills. And then you can look at the difference in the beef tallow to where it globs and gloops in a way that beef tallow does not. So their way of trying to, control the price, whereas typically something like Epic Foods, you would be paying the actual real price for something, to where for, the little jar of oil, it might be, $12 or something like that. So their way of controlling it, or lowering the price, or lowering the not having to actually get a smaller container, is by just lowering the quality of things, which is why just so many things have gone from, beef tallow or this thing or that thing that would be more expensive, would have actual real costs. It just goes to a cheaper alternative. So you're not even getting the same product. In the same way that this is something that people will look at, or I would say with, the idea of capitalism or a general market economy overall, to look at of the idea of, everything is so much cheaper now. And then you're not getting the same quality of product that you were before. Whereas you look at a table, right? The tables that you get, just random IKEA table, it's like, it's so much cheaper. But that table is going to last maybe 10 years of real use. And it's just going to go away. It's just a significantly worse quality product. Nothing has been made cheaper. You have only been getting a cheaper good. Whereas to get an actual artisan table, a table that will last you generations, that you will be able to pass on to your great or even great grandkids, that cost is the same as it was before to the where it is now. And if anything, it might actually be more expensive, because since there is less of a demand, less of an ability for people to actually make a living cultivating these skills, there are less people who actually know how to make a real table. And in that sense, you're actually just getting lower quality products, and the products that people got before don't exist anymore. Like, you just cannot get the same quality of food, the same quality of goods, tables, really anything that people got before.
Yeah, I grew up in Amish country,
Mhm.
and the Amish are, if you ever live around them, they're famous for their furniture. Ooh, their furniture, and their furniture is fairly cheap actually, but it's made in the old ways. And just because they don't have to pay taxes is why it's so cheap. They're tax exempt.
Yeah.
Makes it very, very cheap, comparatively speaking. But I knew lots of people who had Amish dinner tables. It was a very
Mhm.
popular thing where I grew up. Oh, this is our dinner table. It's Amish, and the workmanship is very good. But it's because they have an entire trade devoted to it. They can bring up young men and like, hey, you guys are going to make tables and sell them to the outsiders.
Mhm.
And that's what they do. And that's their trade. And they can totally do that only because essentially a government subsidy that says they can
Yeah.
do it without paying taxes. But also, the point is just that when you have a lot of people doing it, the trade gets better, the product gets better, and everything about it is cheaper actually than it would be if nobody was doing it. And so then, moving where I am now, there's significantly less Amish, and I go into different stores or furniture stores and things like this, and I look at the tables, and I just know the different qualities, and it's like, yeah, this is just not gonna last the same way, even though it costs, a premium. It doesn't cost as much.
Mhm.
It, could be bought, but it's just not the same product. You actually can't get the product at all.
Mhm.
It reminds me of 90s Taco Bell.
Mhm.
This is related, trust me. So 90s Taco Bell, you could get all kinds of delicious stuff. Even in the 2000s, you could get the beefy 5-layer burrito, and it
Mhm.
was like a meal.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't exist.
Mhm.
On the menu, there's this thing, and they're like, this is the thing. You can't pay more to get the product.
Mhm.
The product is gone entirely from the menu. Just like their meat used to be more like 80% beef and then 20% filler. And now it's closer to 40% beef and the rest is filler.
Yeah.
And where the filler used to be like chicken or cheaper meats, now the filler is like soy grain and wheat,
Yeah.
barley. So again, the product just doesn't even exist. You can't go to Taco Bell and get a taco from the 90s. They're not available.
Mhm.
And this is a big thing that people don't understand about how markets shift when you're under inflation. Certain things just go away and they don't come back. And you think you have something and it's not the thing. I remember my mom telling the story the first time she had a real banana in Peru.
Okay.
Not Peru, Panama, excuse me.
Mhm.
And she hated bananas growing up. And then she went to Panama and tried a banana and she was like, oh, this is what they're supposed to be like?
Yeah, I understand it now.
These are so, so good. And it's kind of the same thing where there's so many products like this. Bacon is one of them. It's so difficult. Like, if you're not a bacon head, that's fine. It's so difficult to get good bacon. And this
Mhm.
should be the simplest thing.
Yeah.
Bacon's cheaper than it's ever been, and it's more plenteous with more brands, but there's so little that's actual bacon.
Mhm.
So much of it is all these shortcuts and not the right cuts, or if they are the right cuts, they're not seasoned correctly, and yada, yada, yada. It goes on and on and on.
The meat quality is infinitely lower.
Exactly. And like, you can tell when you cook it.
Let me just give a very specific example.
Mhm.
Is people taking videos of the pig factories to where all
Yeah.
of these things are happening, and they're taking packages from restaurants and stuff of these burger buns went bad, can't sell them anymore to humans. So what they do is they grind it up, package included, so the plastic is getting eaten by the pigs. And because pigs are monogastric animals similar to us, when they eat plastic, the plastic is represented in their meat.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for a cow, that wouldn't happen, but for a pig, it's so much more important for them to get quality feed. And it's so much more difficult to find pigs that actually do have quality feed. You have to go above and beyond to actually get it. And when you do go above and beyond to get it, you're paying the actual real price.
Yeah. And that's just an extreme price. And not to mention water injection. That's
Mhm.
another
Yeah.
huge thing. Just injecting all the meat with water, which makes it fry up horribly. And this is true of briskets too. You can buy briskets in the store, and sometimes you're getting real brisket, and sometimes it's literally like 3 pounds of water.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually more than that, because it's like well over half a gallon, which is like 4
Yep.
pounds.
That's what Costco does with all of their meat.
Is that what they do?
Yeah, they do inject it with a lot of water. It's also why I haven't gotten it in a while. So this is just me saying something that is unconfirmed, because I don't get things like this anymore. But just some people having the idea of Costco chickens, if you really kind of smell it, tastes like used bandages. or it smells like used bandages
Mm.
because of the liquid that they put into it to bolster up the amount of actual chicken that is there
You're talking
visually.
about the roasted ones
Yeah,
that you buy that are roasted.
Yeah, no, the $5 ones that you're getting to where everybody is like, I'm a gym bro and bodybuilder. Oh, instead of getting this other garbage food, I'm gonna go get this nice rotisserie chicken, and that's gonna be my lunch.
That's one of those things that just blows me away. We talked about this a little in the health episode too. Is just the lies about the macros.
Mhm.
It's like, 3 ounces of chicken. This is 20, 27, 28 grams of protein, right?
Mhm.
It's like, no,
Yeah.
it's not, because it's water.
Mhm.
Especially when you have juicy chicken. If your rotisserie chicken is like really juicy,
Yeah.
I've actually never had the Costco rotisserie chicken, but I know this is the case at various Kroger store rotisserie chickens, which are not as cheap, but you buy them. And sometimes you get them and it's like, that is a small bird. And sometimes you get them and it's like, this thing is swollen.
Mhm.
And so that would make sense. I didn't think about that. But
Yeah.
this is the case so many times. Getting the quality of meat is so important, because otherwise you have to eat so much more than you otherwise would have. And you think you're getting all these nutrients and you're just not. And if you're like me and you don't eat the skin on chicken, you just shouldn't eat chicken at all. So
Yeah, which also just goes into, if you're having to eat more because there's more filler, so to actually get the real nutrition, you're having to eat more. That's also going to wreak havoc on your gut.
Yes.
Because you're having to digest so much more physical space, more things that don't actually give you value, which is going to cause a whole bunch of health issues, which, you can go back to the health episode and a lot of things will be talked about that in terms of the experience that I went through is actually much more common these days. So many more people are going through things that I've gone through. And, I'm graped just like everybody else. Even when I'm trying to do all of these things, I'm still, still got jabbed a whole bunch of times as a kid, both in martial arts and in other aspects. Still, got cut out of my mother's womb. I still got soy-fed formula. Just on all of these things, I'm playing life on hard mode.
You really are.
Yeah.
One of the things we talked about, just empathy. We talked about this in the health episode, but just kind of recap. You having empathy for people, especially fat people, overweight people, partly because of you going through similar issues with the mental aspect of when people are obese, when you're really low energy, and then just me bragging, can't relate.
Yeah.
Just having the ultimate trifecta in terms of how I was born and nurtured, and my parents really looking out for me, not getting jabbed, not getting forcefully removed, and actually being breastfed. The health difference is monumental. Just in the base level of what I have to do to be healthy versus what you have to do. And I think people probably don't understand this, how much time you spend on making sure you're eating the right thing, the best possible option, even in a situation where it's they're suboptimal, but you need to eat. A lot of time and mental energy goes into that. That for me, even though it's nice for me to also eat that way, I don't actually have to invest that background data into necessarily picking the best possible options. And that is playing life on easy mode. It's the ultimate advantage, so to speak. And it makes it very difficult to relate to similar people of my generation. If I've gone through things that they've gone through, it's easy. If you've got knee pain, I got you. I understand. But people with brain fog and things like that are just so far outside my understanding, because I was raised so far outside of the system that promotes learning more about this background kind of noise that just annoys people does help me to be more empathetic with a lot of different people that I know. It's why don't you just, I'm like the boomer, why don't you just be like me?
Yeah.
Why don't you just get up in the morning and feel great at 6 a.m.?
Yeah, another example is just, somebody that I came with here, also Arizona bro. And he, always locks his car, even when it might not be necessarily convenient, because he's just so used to the idea of, always having to lock things, because that's just something that's just much more on the mind. Going back to the idea of, not trying to talk both ends out of my mouth of, it's just the illusion, the idea of, maybe these things happen versus, what the reality has actually happened. I have had 4 bikes stolen from me.
So the whole my windows down is the reason you didn't get broken is probably almost entirely because your car's a beater.
Yes. Yeah. Because yeah, if you do just leave something, it will get taken. And then with what we're saying before, with the idea is more of just like the incremental stages.
Yeah.
Because you have to get people used to the idea before it even is the case, is the reality. And then people are more accepting of it because they're already used to it, and it's no longer a change in mindset versus, oh, I think things might get stolen from me versus things actually getting stolen from me.
Yeah, it's really similar to what we talked about, and I'm not going to derail you too much here, but we talked about where people will say, a news story comes out, oh, Donald Trump is a bad man. And then all the hype dies down, and then another news story actually proved Donald Trump isn't a bad man. Mm-hmm. But then it turns out Donald Trump is a bad man. Mm-hmm. No one has any emotional energy left to care or to worry. Mm-hmm. So Donald Trump could be the worst man imaginable. Just doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And that's just like a really vague example of how by just stating the thing when it's not actually there, the response has no back to it. Mm-hmm. There's no bite to people's objections to it. So someone says, oh, your bike got stolen, and then you grieve for it, and you have this horrible experience, and then it turns out your bike wasn't stolen. It might as well have been stolen. You've already gone through all the things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and more topical example of what you're talking about is like, being called a specific name, a specific accusation of supporting, a particular party in a certain point in the middle of the century, in the middle of the European continent, is one thing that was constantly accused of over and over and over again. So it's at the point to where it's there's no emotional vigor to care, even when it's maybe it was a little bit too far here, but then there's people that are actually of that ideas, and then it's just there's just so much less energy to care. And there's not even like a value analysis on that. That just is the reality of what has happened. Of, there are people that are actually espousing those things, mm-hmm. and people just don't care anymore, factually.
Yeah.
In reality, de facto, because it's been something that has been so normalized, and then also just in the idea of I just don't have any emotional energy to care about this thing anymore.
Yeah. So then you were onto something before brought off on that topic in terms of your guy that came with you here from Arizona, mm-hmm. Locking the keys in the car.
Yeah. Something that I was going to go that's kind of related, okay. kind of not. Just a really interesting idea that was brought up that I saw is just the idea that you have a couple separate environments, a couple different people. One is somebody who gets their packages stolen, their Amazon packages. They're left on their door, and they don't pick them up right away, and they get stolen. Very common thing that happens.
Yeah.
And then there's somebody who is spending every 15 minutes they're checking, oh, is there a package, to make sure that as soon as the package comes, they're at the door. And then there's the third person who just completely disregards this entirely and gets an Amazon locker, mm-hmm. so that it's locked up at an off-site, and they're having to drive 15 minutes to get their package after it's delivered. And all three of these things are identical in terms of the problem exists in each specific one, to where only one of them has an actual crime being perpetrated.
Right.
But the amount of mental energy is the same on each specific person. And really, in terms of if you want people to be negatively affected by this, you don't care which option the people take, because you don't care if people actually get their packages stolen. All you care about is that people are having to put so much mental energy to have all of these open loops of, oh, my package might be stolen, or, oh, I gotta go drive here, or, oh, I gotta do, there's all of these extra things that are being weighed onto people to mentally burden people. And that is the goal. So that is what happens. So don't actually care if you get stolen from.
Yeah, I think that's probably a really important understanding, is that we understand this from the Bible. The wisdom literature of the Bible says, don't make a joke where you go and tell someone, aha, your dog is dead. I was joking.
Mhm.
Now I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but this is essentially the literal meaning of what it's talking about here. There's wisdom in that. And the understanding that was understood by the author of those passages is the same that I think we kind of have here, in that you hurt people when you make them think bad things have happened to them.
Mhm.
There is a damage to that. It may not be as bad as actually doing something to them, but it's still not okay. And so when you go through life and the media is telling you all these bad things are happening, and you manage to engage in their kind of role play where you insert yourself into the victim, because the victim of whatever crime it was looks like you, or was a gamer like you, or doing the same thing you do. Oh, this guy was on his way to a dojo and these people accosted him and like stole his gi or something. Like, oh, that hurts, man. I can imagine how much that would hurt. Well, you're literally victimizing yourself in that by reading that and attributing that to you. And now you're always thinking when you're walking to the dojo, who's trying to steal my gi or whatever, right? And so the point is that you have to separate yourself from this and not be affected. This is where the everything is fake is so powerful as a concept, because now you're not the victim anymore. You can go, nah, don't think so. And then when something does happen to somebody you can actually commiserate with them. That is a good kind of bonding. You can go, I understand that, man. That's really terrible. You don't have to immediately feel the same pain by like empathizing with the individual. When something bad happens to your friend, you can just be sad for them rather than being sad that it happened to you vicariously.
And this just ultimately goes back into a point that we talked about in one of the first 2 episodes, is just the idea of trying to just do what you can to exist in this world that is trying to make you insane, and to be sane. When everything is trying to make you, this is something you actively have to resist in one way or another. Some people can look at the news stories and just say, it's fake, and then not get emotionally affected. Or there's some people who might have to just completely abstain, because in the same way that people cry when Iron Man dies,
right?
Even though they know it's fiction, they're still emotionally being affected by this. Some people just need to not interact with these things at all. And then so you just kind of need to be aware of who you are as a person and understand what methods that you need to take to defend yourself against these things, and to not fall into all of these traps that are being laid for you, because there are essentially a minefield that you're constantly walking through. And you can either choose to, I got hit by that. Let me just fully wound. Let's sit here for a couple months while my wound heals. And then, all right, we're just going to go straight back into the minefield, because some vague thing that I want to go to in terms of there's a thing in the middle of the field, which is this thing that I should be attaining. And then it's just not something that's actually valuable. Thinking about the idea of, there's this giant cornfield, minefield, completely surrounded by mines, no way of really going around it. And, in the middle is a college education or something. And it's I just still got to do it. I still got to go for it. Even when you understand all of the negative things, you're this thing is still super important. Whereas you can just, abstain. You can just say that, maybe this thing might give some hypothetical value in this specific sense, but I don't want to walk through a minefield, because that's pretty bad. I want to keep my legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and then, people always say, what if I'm well equipped and I have the ability to go through the minefield? And it's if you have the ability to go through the minefield, you're more valuable than the college education could ever add to you. If you have the ability to walk through mines, you don't need the college education to be valuable. Find your value elsewhere. And it's kind of one of the things that drove me to abandon any kind of pursuit of higher education. I was very much, I wouldn't say I was into that. I was working trades, but I was taking these classes and stuff. And the more I got into it, the more I realized there's all these dangers all around. And then also the thing in the center isn't actually adding value to me. I don't need to go into there. But this is the trap. People always cope about what if I can defuse the mines? What if I'm this? What if I'm that? Is it really worth the risk? If you're that talented of an individual already, you can deactivate the minefield. Why are you trying to better yourself with this silly thing here? Go find a minefield that has something actually valuable, like a wife in it or something.
Yeah. Or otherwise, you could just go shoutcast League of Legends or something.
Yeah. turns out the minefield around that's even worse than college or something. I don't know.
And there's even less value in the center.
That's way less value in the center.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
So, yeah, in that sense, don't do these fake things. Keep the understanding that, you know, all of these things are designed to abuse you, and you are going to spend a lot of effort trying to normalize it. So really just be aware of these things and understand the best ways that you can deal with them. And with that being said, it's been real.
It's been real.